Good day, grade 7 students. My name is Miss Daniela Rosales, and for today's video lesson, we will about to unleash and study the genres of literature. But before that, I am going to present the objectives for today's video lesson. The first objective is to know the different genres of literature. The second one is to write a short literary piece by using poetry as a genre. And the third one is to realize that different genres are important parts in understanding literature. So that's it for our objectives. So now we will be proceeding to our engagement activity that will going to help us to have an overview of what topic we will be discussing today. So here's the direction. Arrange the jumbled letters. I know that you are all familiar for this kind of activity, so let us start. Number 1, the letters are AMADR. What do you think is the correct answer? The answer is drama. The second one is ROHRO. The answer is horror. The third one is TLHSCIOARI, NFCTOII. What do you think is the answer? Alright, the answer is historical fiction. Number 4, the letters are GDNELE. Yes, the right answer is legend. So we are now down to the last number, and the letters are IRFAYLEAT. The answer is fairy tale. So that's it for our engagement activity. I hope you learned something before we proceed for our actual lesson. Let us now go for the actual lesson that we have for today, and let us define first what is literature, or the word literature. Literature comes from the Latin word litera. It means the acquaintance with letters. Literature is the body of work. It is a collection of written works or a collection of arts. So it can also be passed down by the mouths of the people who are telling the story. So it can still be considered as literature. So technically, it contains imaginative language and it portrays thoughts, emotions, and experiences of human conditions. Obviously, that all the authors are free because whatever they feel, whatever the thoughts they have in mind, they can write it. And it is all valid because it will always depend on their experiences, it will always depend on their wisdom and knowledge that they have in them that they will be sharing to other people through oral or through written or through arts. So after unleashing or discovering the definition of literature, we are now down to the list of literary genre. And the first one here is the drama. So drama is composed of verse and prose. It is a theatrical play or performance. So literally, the conflicts and emotion are expressed through dialogue and action. In literature, drama is the portrayal of a fictional or non-fictional events through the performance of written dialogue. So it can be prose or poetry. So dramas can be performed on stage or in the crowd, on film, or on the radio. So dramas are typically called plays and their creators are known as the playwrights or the dramatists. So the examples are, here in the Philippines, we all know that Filipinos really love dramas. And we have different kind of teleseries in the different channels that we have here in the Philippines. So one of the examples are the drama or the teleserye Kambal Karibal, which the ghost is always wearing slippers. Yeah. And the other example is the Provinciano or Ang Provinciano. So if you know Cardo, he is very famous here in the Philippines because he is said or believed to be, or he is said that he did not experience that, even though he is always being shot by the gun. So that's the example for drama. The second on the list is fable. We all know that fables are intended for children. So, based on our slide, fables is the narration demonstrating a useful truth. And it is um obviously a narrative form that usually featuring animals that behave and speak as human beings. So it means they are acting, they are moving, they are um having conversation just like a human beings. So in order to highlight human characteristic or human condition or human strengths and weaknesses. So there's always a moral lesson or um appropriate behavior that the children can get by watching this kind of literature. So even though you are not a child, you can still watch this kind of literature because we still just like me, I still have um things that I need to know even though I am in this level of age. So that's it. So the example for this fable here in the Philippines is why the fish has scales and the necklace and the comb. So sa Tagalog, meron din po tayong pwedeng mahalimbawa na ang matching at ang pagong. So it is very familiar for all of us. Even me, I am really familiar to that because my teacher usually um tells me that. So that's it. So the third literary genre is the fairy tale. So fairy tale is also called magic tale or wonder tale. It is the stories about fairies or other magical creatures. The stories or the fairy tales are intended for children's. So it is a literature about magical stories that is intended, as I've said earlier, for the children. Most of the themes falls on the fairies helping the poor and brave girl or boy who wants to experience something magical. So it is a very familiar for all of us because even though in our time there's still many fairy tales that we used to watch, but here in the Philippines I can give some examples like the Abadeha or the Philippine Cinderella and the Ang Pambihirang Buhok ni Lola. So you can research this if you wanted to know more about this fairy tale. So let's now proceed to the fourth one, the fourth literary genre, which is the fantasy. So fantasy is a type of a fiction story. It is somehow the same with the fairy tale. So it has strange setting and characters. So fiction which invite suspensions or reality. So in literature, it features magical and supernatural elements that do not exist in the real world. So take note of that. Do not exist in the human world or the real world. So although some writers are exaggerating a real-world setting with fantastical elements. It creates an entirely imaginary universes with their own physical laws and logic and populations that are not the same with humans or the humans in the real world. But it is very influential because it created from speculations and it is not tied of reality or in any scientific fact. So there are some subgenres. So I'll going to dictate to you the subgenres of fantasy, and the first one is the epic fantasy. The second one is the magical realism. The third one is low fantasy. The fourth one is the sword and sorcery. And the fifth one is dark fantasy, and the last one is the superhero fiction. So I'll give you an example in our country, and that is the Jezebel. So that's the example for fantasy. We know, or we all know, that Jezebel is a half human and a half fish, or and a half sea creature. So that's the example for fantasy. We are down to the fifth literary genre, and that is fiction. As you see in the slide, it is a type of narrative literary work. The content is produced by the imaginations of human minds, and it is not necessarily based on facts because it is just came from the imaginations of humans. So, in literature, it's created, as I've said earlier, from the imagination of humans, merely not presented as facts. There are types of literature in fiction, and it includes novels and short stories. So, the example, or the perfect example here, is the Florante at Laura. The next literary genre is folklore. So folklore is handed down by the use of word of mouth. So it is a traditional customs preserved by people. The songs, the stories, the myths, and proverbs of a people are considered folklore. So in literature, folklore is typically, as I've said earlier, is passed down using the word of mouth, or it is also called the tales people tell. Take note of that. The tales people tell. So folklore has commonly no authors since it has been passed down orally with no film writers. So some other people take down the information to seemingly preserve the story. So the only key to last is to tell and tell the stories to every people even outside of the community. So in Tagalog, or in some cases, it is called the kwentong bayan. So the example for folklore is this: The Boy Who Became a Stone, Ang Batang Lalaki na Naging Bato, and The Man with the Coconuts. So, after learning the folklore, which is considered as a literary genre, the next one is the historical fiction. So, obviously, it is a fictional story, but it took place in the past. So, fictional characters and events in a historical setting. So, in literature, the novels that captures the details of the time period as accurately as possible for the authenticity, including the groups or the social norms, or the, what do you call it, the standards of every community or every society, the manners on how they act, on how they behave, or their traditions. It is also included their customs, and many novels in this genre are all fictional stories, but the settings, the characters are historical figures or in the historical events. So the example for historical fictions are here: The Noli Me Tangere by our hero, our national hero, Jose Rizal, and Ang Mga Ibong Mandaragit by Amado V. Hernandez. The eighth literary genre is the horror. I know that all of you guys are interested in reading horror books and watching horror movies because it literally gives us an intense feeling of fear. So, horror movies or horror books are considered as fiction that contains frightful, shocking events. So, the events that evoke a feeling of dread in both characters and in the readers. Alright, so it is a type of literature where the main themes are indulging fear and shocking events. So it might be connected by a ghost or other creatures that stimulates fear to the viewers or the readers. So the writers uses themes and situations that can elicit a sense of fear. So the example here is here. The Murder on Balete Drive by Budget Tan and Cajo Baldismo. And the other one is Ang Mga Kaibigan ni Mama Susan by Bob Ong. So the other literary genre is the humor. So humor is can be contained or can be found in all genres that we are discussing about. So this is considered a fiction meant to entertain people or to give fun, because humor literature is obviously full of fun, fancy, and excitement. So it is a type of literature, as I've said earlier, that makes the people laugh, that makes the people happy. All right. And humor literature uses different techniques, tools, or words, and even full sentences in order to bring to light new and funny sides of life. So even a specific or in the midst of a struggle, humor or giving information that can make people happy can give them light in the life that they are experiencing. So humor is often found in literature, theater, movies, and advertising. So where the major purpose is to make the audience happy. So we can say that humor is one of the most effective literary weapons to please the audience as it develops connections and the characters makes the plots more useful and memorable. So humor plays many functions in a literary work. It arouses or it arises or it dominates the interest among the readers that sustains their attentions, that helps them connect with the characters and emphasize relates related ideas and helps the readers picture or illustrate the situation. So the example for humor is The Aba, Nakakabasa na pala ako, mga kwentong chok ni Bob Ong. So I know guys that some of you know or already know this book. And the other one is The Kwentong Kutsero by Epifanio G. Matute. So we are down to the 10th literary genre, and that is the legend, or in Tagalog, alamat. So it is a type of traditional story. It usually tells the story of a national or a folk hero, and it has basis in facts, but also includes imaginative material. So legends are very popular here in the Philippines or in any other countries because it talks about the origin of something. All right? So legend is about a particular person or place. So formerly, the term legend meant a tale about the saints or about the things, about a fruit or even a person. So this may include supernatural beings, magical powers, or elements of mythology, or explanation of natural phenomena, but they are associated or connected with a particular community or locality or person and are told as a matter of history and as I've said earlier, the origin of something. So the example here is, I know you all aware about the legend of pineapple, or in Tagalog, ang alamat ng pinya. So, we also tackled before the legend of Mount Mayon and the legend of Mount Makiling. So, there are so many legends that we have here in the Philippines. The 11th type of literary genre is the mystery. So, as we refer to our slide, all right. So, it is usually pertains to murder. It deals with the solutions of a crime or the unrevealing of secrets. So, mystery is simply an unsolved question and the attempt to answer that specific question. In literature, this mystery is often a crime, a murder, but anything that can be considered as unexplainable can inspire a great mystery novel. So, like all genre fiction, mystery follows a formula that must be obeyed or that must be do, and the reader that expect, or should I say that the readers expected to have, or the ending that they expect. So every mystery books, the answer is always on the latter part of the story. So the example for the 11th literary genre is si Janus Silang at ang Tiyanak ng Tabon. And also the 13 that we can watch in Netflix if you have that in your phones. The 12th literary genre is mythology. So it is all about the historical events, and it's also all about the gods and goddesses and that took place before time, and also it reveals the human behavior and the natural phenomena. It also flashes or shows the connections of human or the mortals and to the immortals, which considered as the gods and goddesses. And also we can mm, witness the actions of the gods. So there are many stories that can be considered as myths, not just only in the Philippines but also to the other country, especially in Greece. All right, so the word myths comes from the mythos, which means story. So this are the kind of stories that is connected to religion and beliefs to the divine beings who are considered as half god and half man that possesses strong powers. So these are also passed down by the word of mouth. So the example that I am going to give you is a very interesting story or interesting myth, and that is the alamat of Tungkong Langit and Alunsina. So that's all for the 12th literary genre. So now, we are down to the 13th literary genre, which is poetry. So we all know that poetry is a type of literature that conveys a thought, a feeling of a human condition. It also describes a scene or tells a story in a concentrated manner. So it has lyrical arrangement of every words in a line and in the stanza. So poems can be structured or not, and it is included or considered as a pre-verse poem. Mostly, poetry has rhyming lines and meter. So the rhythm and emphasis of a line based on a syllabic beat. So we encounter different kinds of poem. And one of the examples are Isang Dipang Langit. It is a piece of heaven by Amado B. Hernandez, and The Tanikalang Ginto by Juan Abad. So, realistic fiction is also considered as a genre of literature. So, it is a genre that consists of stories that could have actually occurred to people, including the animals, in a believable or in a real setting. These stories resemble real life, and fictional characters within these stories react very similar or the same to real people. So stories that are classified as realistic fiction have plots that highlight social, personal events or issues that reflects or mirror the contemporary life or the current situations that we have even right now, such as falling in love, marriage, um, um, divorce, that are commonly occurring in couples and finding a job or even the vices that the people have, including the alcoholism. So realistic fictions stories tend to take place in the present or recent past. So it means that realistic fiction can considered the past, not just only the present situation or the present time. So there are some reminders about realistic fiction. So characters are involved in events that could happen. So characters live in places that could be or are real. So it is very illustrative and very realistic. So the characters seems like real people with real issues solved in a realistic way. So I think it can be considered, or the issues about families or family feud can be considered that are being solved in this kind of literary genres. And lastly, the events portrayed in realistic fiction setting that present questions that a reader could face in everyday life or everyday situations that the people have. So that's all for the 14th literary genre. The last literary genre is the science fiction. So it is a fiction that deals to science, obviously, and it weighs an actual impact of actual, imagined, or potential science. So usually set in a future or on other planets. So science fiction is a fictionalized story wherein the setting and the plot are centered around technology that we have today, different devices or any other kinds of devices that can be included in technology. So it also considered in the time travels, outer space, or scientific principles, with or without the presence of our favorite, the aliens. So the story elements are very describable and can be illustrated or can be imagined by the people that can happen in the future. So it is a blending of science fiction and fantasy genres. So this just explains the existence of humans, the existence of the world, or the situations and magic that we usually have in our everyday lives. And the example for science fiction is The Packing for the Moon by Dean Francis Alfar and The Once They Were Gods by Eliza Victoria. Alright, and that's the end of our video lesson for today about the literary genres. I hope you learned something. Bye! Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day, everyone.